Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slasher U. I'm your host, Christian Rao, here with my co-host, Steve Feck, and we are about to break down for the first episode of the 2023 year college softball. So excited to finally get this on the page as we weren't around for last season in college softball. You and I both paid a lot of attention to the College World Series, and that is exactly why we are going to start with this team. The projected lineup for the Oklahoma Sooners as they prepare for the national title defense. That's what we're going to get into in this one. We're going to do a team preview of the Oklahoma Sooners. They begin their quest for not just one, not just two, but three straight national championships. It's going to be a pretty interesting time for Oklahoma. You know, obviously the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Oklahoma, Steve, is Jocelyn Alo. Right. Obviously she's no longer there anymore. So this is going to be a brand new Oklahoma team. But there's a lot of great players still on this squad from last season, and probably one of the most monumental transfer classes, if you will, for all of college softball. We'll definitely get to that. So before we dig into player by player, start going into some of the positions and what we think about this team moving forward, what's your initial thoughts on Oklahoma and obviously the magical run last year, and then what we can expect moving this year?
I could probably keep it simple, which would make the audience happy, and just say this is a really good team. But when you want to have some perspective on things, they've been the number one team in the country for more than one calendar year now. I mean, all of those polls, they've been the number one team in the country. And you talked about losing a player like Jocelyn Alo, and you don't replace a player like that. As cliched as it is, you just do not. But you do use what her legacy is, and she certainly was, by all accounts, as great a person and a teammate as she was a softball player. So you now have had younger players come up through the ranks that played with her that have seen how the greats do it. And I think that's really important. You know, you look at this team, the last two national freshmen of the year are now on this Oklahoma team. Again, now Sydney Sanders was not freshman of the year at Oklahoma. I mean, she's one of the people we were talking about that came in. But, you know, Tiara Jennings 2 years ago, national freshman of the year. So there is, again, the culture. More than any sports, college sports at any level, culture is really important. You always hear about it when they fire a manager, you know, in the major leagues, or they change a head coach in football or basketball or whatever professional sport it is. And, well, we want a new culture and we don't like the culture of the locker room. Really, it's just an excuse to explain why, you know, you sucked the year before. In college, culture is really important, and you're not going to be good year in, year out unless there is a winning, positive developmental culture. And certainly under Patty Gasso, this Oklahoma program, now again, Patty Gasso built upon an existing culture, certainly, but she has really taken it to another level. She has adopted a nice blend of analytics and just old-time good fundamental softball playing, and she also has embraced, you know, the transfer portal. Okay, if it's available to you, what are you supposed to say? Well, no, I'm not going to do that. You know, I mean, that's stupid. It's something that's available to even the better programs, and the better you are, the better the chances are you're going to get a great player. So, yeah, this Oklahoma team is going to be special. You know, we talked about, you know, the number one team, you know, on the men's side last night. Oklahoma has a chance to also, I think, put together kind of a monster year. The only thing that's going to slow them down is the competition within the conference itself that they play in.
I agree. And as you mentioned, we did talk about the college baseball preview, started those just the other night. If you're looking for that in podcast form, go ahead, just type in /U college baseball. You'll see a /U logo with just a different color, and that'll be for baseball. The yellow is going to be our color for softball as we move on with /U. And if you're on YouTube, on our /U account, you're going to get it all in one spot. We have them sorted by playlist if you're looking for it. But yes, all that is going to be fantastic. So looking forward to that. Let's go ahead. And even though I want to talk about these hitters and who's going to if anybody can replace Jocelyn Alo. I don't know if that's the actual question we need an answer to, but if they can have enough offensive production to at least be as good, we'll get to that in a moment. But I want to start off with the pitchers. And I think that even though there are some fantastic offensive production on this team, and that's what obviously we pay attention to, especially in the College World Series, the pitching was fantastic last year as well. And one name that comes to mind that we saw do great things in the College World Series, and she's going to come back for a season after doing some great things in her true freshman year, is Jordy Bahl. I mean, Jordy Bahl is, when I think of top college pitchers in softball, Jordy Bahl is by far in the conversation at the very top in my mind. She took the world by storm in her first season as a true freshman. She went 141 innings. She did have a little bit of injuries, but when she wasn't dealing with injuries, she went 22-1, 205 strikeouts in those 141 innings, and threw 14 complete games. This is exactly what you need when you lose someone like a Hope Tretwin, who was fantastic for Oklahoma last year. Somebody who can pitch just great, can throw nails, but can also eat innings. I expect if she stays healthy, she'll surpass the 200 inning mark, and she will be right in the running for pitcher of the year, Steve.
I agree with almost everything you said, except her pitching 200 innings this year. I think the fact that the shoulder issue, and it came up at a bad time. It was being basically sure. As they were going into conference, play and all. I would think, and I think that's why they aggressively went out into the transfer portal and the recruiting classes, trying to bring more arms in. You would think, well, you've got a great staff. Why are you focusing on that? I think for her future, you have to perhaps ease into it a little bit. Now, if we were talking about a men's pitcher, I tend to always go on the other side and say, well, you can't baby them. But you can't baby players that aren't hurt. She was hurt. And when you're talking about a shoulder, I mean, everybody's always talking about Tommy John, and the elbow ligaments and all of that. To me, if you have a serious injury to your shoulder, you're done. You're never the same pitcher again. So I think they need to take a little bit of time with her and maybe not allow as many complete games. So if she falls short of the 200 inning mark, does that mean she's having a worse year than she did in her freshman year? No, they needed her to pitch those innings last year, and she stepped in and she did it. But I think taking a more cautious approach with Jordy Bahl is really the way to go. And we're going to talk about another pitcher, I'm sure, here coming up. That's going to make it a lot easier because you talked about her strikeout numbers, Jordy Bahl. Alex Storeko, coming in from Michigan, pitched 200 innings, had 300 strikeouts.
Yeah, 3-2 ratio is just absolutely insane. And when you talk about someone who already had 200 innings, that is huge to put right as what I assume as the number 2 pitcher in this rotation, especially if something happens with Bahl or they decide they want to take it easy with her. As you mentioned, Storeko can go that 200 innings. Maybe we see her go upwards to 210, 215. Regardless, 300 strikeouts and 200 innings is absolutely insane. I do think that Bahl was on that type of trajectory, though, last year as well, barring injuries. So imagine that you have the potential. I don't see it. I agree with you. I probably don't see her reaching 200 innings either, but you have the potential of having your 1-2 pitchers be a 200 inning, 300 strikeout type kind of player. And that is absolutely outstanding to be your 1-2. Rounding out the rest of this starting rotation right now, it seems like they're going to go to Nicole May as well and freshman Kristen Deal. SJ Grin might also be into the conversation. So a lot of freshmen in the conversation towards the back of the rotation. It worked great for them last year with Jordy Bahl. So I don't want to be skeptical or worried at all because with Patty Gasso, with coaching behind the helm, I'm not worried at all. What she does, she knows softball. And we've seen that for the last few seasons without a question. Don't question her because she knows what she's doing and who she's going to put on that mound. So I'm not sweating it, but I'm looking forward to seeing those freshmen do some work.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of great things about Deal. Admittedly, I have not watched her pitch as much as, and I will admit to you, Christian, and I'm going to admit to the audience out there, did I watch as much women's college softball last year as perhaps I should have? I did not. I got more into it as conference play was really kind of peaking, and then certainly through the various tournaments, in the College World Series. Yes, then I was watching every inning, every pitch, the whole deal. But I'm really excited about this, and I think with our coverage of the women's basketball side, and I keep saying, and you I think concur, this is the best college basketball season we've ever had. I think we might be saying the same thing about this softball field. Now, I think there's a lot more tradition to go through before you would say this potentially would be the best women's softball season ever at the Division I level. But it's something that you just have to wonder. Okay, great. Oklahoma is great. They may not even win their conference, and they can still be a better team because of how many more teams. Oklahoma State jumps to mind right away. I think Texas is going to be a sleeper. I think Texas, they're going to need to be taken seriously here. So it'll be interesting to see. Is Oklahoma really a better team while they might not have the same record?
Kristen Dell is the number one player and number one pitcher in the 2022 recruiting class. She's going to probably get those same type of opportunities as we saw Jordy Ball get last year. The best part about it, in my opinion, is that she's not going to get thrown in as that number one, number two, like Jordy Ball did last year. So if you want to call that a feature role, ace, whatever ace in the making, however you want to call it, she's not going to have to do that. She can work her way from the bottom of the lineup, maybe even in the middle of the rotation, I should say, and prove that she is going to be exactly what they recruited her for. The fact that you have the number one pitcher in your recruiting class being your potential third or fourth starter, that's saying something. This team is going to be special. So looking for, and we just talked about the pitchers. We haven't even got to the bats yet, Steve.
But just one quick thing about going back to the pitchers. Do you make Storako your number one pitcher, though?
No, I think you got to give that nod the ball. Yeah.
I mean, right. Not that she didn't earn it, but again, do you sit her down in the early going and say, for now, our Friday night pitcher is Alex Storako. We want to take it easier with you, especially if the weather is not because again, the spring, in Oklahoma, you could have snow and sleet one day and it could be 80 degrees 2 days later, so maybe if it's one of those damp kind of evenings or whatever, I mean, do you maybe take her back if it's not major competition and say, hey, look, you're going to be there. You're going to be the person we get the ball to in the College World Series. But for now, don't concern yourself with who's one, who's two. Just get yourself healthy, prove to yourself, prove to us that you are truly healthy, and then we'll start letting you push down the accelerator. That's why I asked that question.
I will say that the title will never be taken away from her. That's what I'll say in this case. However, I wouldn't be surprised if we see her on a type of inning limit or something early, just like you mentioned, as they're building her back up, especially if they ever see anything as a concern. You can be sure that they will be paying close attention to that shoulder all season long and for the rest of her career at Oklahoma. You can be sure of that. I just don't think that title will ever be taken away from her. And then obviously when we start talking about the College World Series, the limits will be off as long as she's healthy. That's my thought on that case. But the fact that you have a potential player that could step into that ace role, I mean, that's a great problem to have, right? Fantastic problem to have. All right, Jocelyn Alo, obviously not in the Sooners lineup, even though that they're not going to have her, who was there for a very long time, owns almost every Oklahoma Sooners record for the softball team. 2023 still looks incredibly deep, and there are some nice transfers as well in there. And I think there still is enough bats and talented hitters that Patty Gasso has assembled to be at the top of not just the Big 12, but at the top of the nation again. We're in this kind of conversation with Oklahoma softball, kind of like we are with South Carolina women's basketball, that they have to be, in order for them to move out of that number one ranking, it's going to have to be proved, and it's going to have to be proved very not lightly. It's going to have to be shown. And I think right now, looking at what we're seeing, especially on paper, I know we haven't started playing yet. There's no doubt in my mind that we have Oklahoma as the number one team without question, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, you can make an argument, I think, for Oklahoma State. I think, but again, I think Oklahoma State is more ceiling based as far as thinking they could be the number one team, that they could be the national champ, as opposed to Oklahoma, where I think it's more performance based. But I mean, Oklahoma State, I look forward to talking, about them. I really think there's a special program there. I really, really do. And like I mentioned earlier, I think Texas could really be the sleeping giant, and they could either be really, really good, or they could be wildly inconsistent in the early going. But I think the capital of softball, at least for the 2023 season, is definitely in the state of Oklahoma. It'll be fun to see which of those two rivals actually end up being the best team in the Big 12.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about these batters here. And I think it starts off, in my opinion, in center field with Jada Coleman. I mean, she's been a key contributor at the top of the lineup for Oklahoma. Yeah, and this is the player that we had in front of Jocelyn Alo for the last couple of seasons. There's going to obviously be a new number 2 hitter in the lineup, but there's no doubt in my mind that Jada Coleman's going to be the leadoff. Last year in 2022, she had 8 home runs, drove in 40 from the top of the order, and had a .584 on base percentage. She is the perfect leadoff hitter, and especially to get on base, and whoever goes at number 2, which I have a thought on who that might be. I think Jada Coleman is fantastic. And I haven't even talked about her defensive play. She does great things there. But that is a great leader to have on this squad. And I see her taking more of a leadership role with Alo out, and her kind of taking over this squad.
Yeah, and obviously she's a very talented hitter. She gets on base. She's very disciplined. She stays in the moment. She doesn't get too up and too down. But for me, when I saw her play enough last year, she can pick it with anyone. And when I say anyone, she can defend as well as just about any male outfielder at the Division I rankings. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's softball or whatever it is. I mean, she can just flat out pick it. And up the middle, I mean, they are really solid up the middle. I'm sure we'll talk about Grace Lyons here in a little bit, but she is right. She is going to be that, that sort of like that little whip on the back of a racehorse, sort of to take off. She's going to be that. She's going to be that whip to get things started, and then how they slot behind that. It'll be interesting. You said you had an idea about, you were theorizing who would be number 2 in the lineup. Who do you think?
Well, obviously you can't replace Jocelyn Alo. There's no doubt about that. But I think Patty Gasso and the staff at Oklahoma did a really good job at going out into the transfer portal and bringing in players. Now, again, you can't replace her, but I think you got a very good so the shoes aren't as big, right? When they put the shoes on, maybe there's a little bit of room in the toe, but they're not snug by no means, but there's a little bit of room for growing. And I think that's Cindy Sanders, who's going to play first base for Oklahoma. I think that she's going to be the number 2 spot here. I mean, she was fantastic last year for Arizona State. She hit 21 home runs as a freshman. So I think if you put her in the 2 hole, give her the same type of insurance, if you will, or protection as Alo had with having the leadoff hitter Coleman in front of her, I think she's only succeeds even farther. I mean, dare I say, Cindy Sanders has even a better season this year than her 21 home runs last year for Arizona State.
Yeah, no, I agree. And if we were having this conversation even 5 years ago, you would say, "Oh no, she's your number 3 hitter," because that's where your quote unquote best hitter, would be. But right now, and I think performance has proven that out, you want to have perhaps your best overall hitter. I'm not saying necessarily that she probably has as much power as anybody on this roster, but in essence, I think she may be the most complete hitter. Even as a sophomore, she may be the most complete hitter on this lineup. So putting her in that 2 hole, I mean, we're talking, a Mike Trout, Vladimir Guerrero kind of, of a comparison of where, of course, baseball players would be. I think her in the 2 hole is perfect. That's what I had written down here, but I was just kind of curious. I thought maybe you were going to really come up with a hot take there, but you know what? It is a hot take, because you're saying, well, how can you have a sophomore replace Jocelyn Alo?
Yeah, and I think it is quite a hot take, because I think you could put her in either 2 or 3 in the lineup, and I think the person that in this case I'm putting in 3 could easily be thrown up in the 2 spot and would succeed as well, and that's Tiare Jennings. I think she would be fantastic, regardless of the order you put them in. Obviously Coleman's going to lead off. There's no doubt about that. But I think having Sanders or Jennings at 2 or 3, if you want to go back and forth with them, so be it. Whatever makes the most sense. But I think Obviously, we've seen some fantastic things from Jennings last year. She led Oklahoma in RBIs last season, each of her first 2 seasons. So I think having her more in the 3 hole would continue and help that as well. That's why I put her there. But if you decide that you want to put her up in the 2 hole with a nice on base percentage player like Coleman to lead off, then I'm not against that either way. But if I'm writing this lineup, and I'm not, but if I am, I'm going Coleman, Sanders, and Jennings, and I'm completely happy with that as my 1, 2, 3.
Oh no, I agree. I also had Jennings there in the 3 hole again because of her penchant for driving in runs. And when you say could each of the last 2 years, remember that means that she led the team in RBIs as a freshman. She led the team as an RBI. And these are 2 years where Jocelyn Alo was on this roster. Okay, was the key part of it. She still led the team in RBIs each of the last 2 years. So, yeah, I think 1, 2, 3. When you get to a team like Oklahoma, it's almost like you're managing an all-star game.
Yeah,
it's like, well, yeah, I guess we can bet this person 7, but really on every other team she's gonna be batting 3 or 4 or 2. But I mean, that's what's so fun about deep teams like this. We can tinker and actually sort of almost micromanage where you might want to put them in a lineup because there's just so much talent. You can put just about, I think, every batter here in any of those in that 2, 3 slot. I think you have to keep Coleman number 1. I just can't imagine why you would move her out of the leadoff side. I just can't imagine the scenario. Unless it's like senior night and you're trying to pull names out of a hat and do that maybe. But, I like the way you got started off here. So who's bat cleanup?
Yeah, Grace Lyons for me is going to be my cleanup at shortstop. I think she's the best shortstop in college softball, period, hands down. I mean, she had a fantastic year last year, had 21 home runs, 70 RBIs. The crazy thing is she had 70 RBIs and didn't lead the team. I mean, that's the wild thing about it. Putting her in cleanup, I think, has the opportunity for her to continue on, get another 20, 25 home run season. And just do great. I know a lot of people have her a little lower in the lineup. That's just a good problem to have for Oklahoma, but she's my cleanup hitter. I think that she's a really good player. I mean, not only does she have a great offensive bat, but her defense is immaculate. And having her in a high confidence spot is exactly what they need for Oklahoma. So having your first base, your second base, and your shortstop in the top 4 of your lineup, not a bad problem to have.
Oh, no, I agree. I agree. I was wondering, do you put Kenzie Hansen or, Haley Lee, who came in from Texas A&M? Do you slot them in the cleanup slot? And then in essence, you're then starting another lineup. So you would have Grace Lyons, who I could see Grace Lyons being a leadoff hitter if you didn't have Coleman. I could see her being able to handle that, the top of the order responsibilities. But so that in essence, you're breaking your lineup where you've got 2 1 through 4s. Then you would then come back with Grace Lyons 5 and then work your way down from there. I mean, I would go Haley Lee only because I think she's got a much higher ceiling as far as power and production, and then get Grace Lyons behind her. But again, if we have to put Grace Lyons at 4, oh boy, I can't believe we're taking that kind of a gamble.
Right.
Saying she's going to be the 4 hitter.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And speaking of Haley Lee, I mean, we're going to see her bat in the lineup every day, whether she plays designated player or platoons at first base, and maybe they'll give Sanders a break and put her at designated player. I know that Lee also played some outfield, some work in left field, and that is something that you could easily rotate through when we start talking about the possibilities who plays left field for Oklahoma. In my mind, that's the next transfer on this list, another Arizona State transfer, and that's Alina Torres. I think I mean, we're talking about these transfers, and every single one of them are over 10, 13, 14 home runs. She had 14 home runs, 40 RBIs. She could play third base as well. That's a good thing to have, but she's a left fielder by trade, and I think that she will move. She'll follow a similar path as Alyssa Brito did in her first season, moving to left field. So I like this lineup so far. Alyssa Brito, I got at third base. The only one we didn't talk about as you mentioned, was Kenzie Hansen. You could fit her anywhere. I mean, you can put her at the cleanup spot if you really wanted to, as you mentioned. But this squad is going to be very fun, Steve. You put it all together. I mean, you have some fantastic transfers who are going to give you production right off the bat with Lee and Sanders and Torres. All 3 of them I see getting everyday at-bats. And then, yeah, just a really good team this year. It's hard to bet against them in any series they play.
Yeah, you know what kind of started the wheels turning when I was doing the research here for this episode is I want to say that Haley Lee's caught some too. So I mean, if that's the case, if she literally is a true utility player, you could give Kinsey Hansen a day off. Literally just rest or use her. I know that Hansen can also play first base, but again, there's so many people.
Designated player as well. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but you're right. But Patty Gasso is great with mixing and matching and knowing just when a player needs some time off. Whether they're struggling for a little bit, maybe they got a bruised hand or a jammed finger. Let's give them a day off. It would be nice to have them in the lineup, but it's okay. Let's give them the day off. I mean, she's a master at that. So she's building and assembling this team in her image, not how she was as a player, but I mean, as she imagines how she likes to manage in a game, a little aggressive. Certainly, don't run yourself out of outs. I mean, good base running, but not stupid base running. Don't run for the sake of running. Solid up the middle. You got Hansen, you have Lyons, you have Jennings, again up the middle, and then you have Coleman in center, really solid up the middle. So what's the negative with this team? I mean, I know we're really struggling to come up with, it's always like, great. We sound like Tony the Tiger, but I don't really see a weakness on this team other than if they suffer injuries with the pitching staff. Yeah. I guess that could be, if Ball is indeed not 100% yet, if some of these younger arms either get tired arm or develop a sore arm, okay, maybe that calls into question how you bridge yourself to your weekend series, so it's a midweek series. But I just can't find a glaring hole on this roster anywhere. I mean, they're deep. They have players that are going to be on the bench and not really see significant at bats that would be starting for 60% of the teams that are out there at Division I level. So, anything jump out at you that's a potential red flag?
I think the only thing that I would call as a weakness is honestly just a concern, saying if they need to start off hot. And the reason I say that is because this season their schedule is pretty tough. They're going to play 9 teams that are currently ranked in the preseason top 25. That's including number 2 UCLA, number 3 Oklahoma State, and number 4 Florida State. Sorry, is number 4. Also, to start their season on February 9th. They're going to play 19 Duke, and then they're going to play 14 Stanford and number 16 Washington, all in the first weekend. So they're going to really get tested right off the bat to make sure, hey, and they're going to, if they lose one of those games, just one, you're going to hear on the national media, oh, they're not the same Oklahoma team without Jocelyn Alo. They have to be ready for that if that's the case. So I think mentality will come in the check really good. Patty Gasso is really good at that stuff. So we shouldn't be too concerned. But if I had to throw a weakness out there, it's just maybe having a slow start. And I know that's a pretty weakness, but that is a valid concern for this squad if you look at their schedule and what they have to face going through before they get ready for the College World Series, which you expect to see them there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only thing that I would point out, and I guess it's kind of tied into schedule but it is, what if whether it be Oklahoma State or Texas, get off to a ridiculously hot start? Do they press? Do they feel the pressure to maybe try to keep pace? Or, I mean, I can't see Gasso letting the team get there. I mean, even if it's one game, she's going to catch and say, whoa. We're not going to the World Series yet. Okay. We're playing Oklahoma State this week, or we're playing TCU or whatever the school might be in conference play. Don't get ahead there. Let's base what's going on in the game in front of us tonight. But if that's the thing that would jump out to me, I don't think that they've had as legitimate challengers in their conference as they have this year in those two teams. And there's more than just those two teams. But for me, those are the two elite teams in addition to Oklahoma that I wonder if they catch fire early, does Oklahoma press?
Yeah, it's a really good thought. I'm interested to see what happens. And we are only just a few weeks away. February 9th starts before college baseball. So that's awesome as well. If you're excited for college softball and college baseball, you get college softball a week early. I mean, how great is that? That's the first one starting for all baseball, softball, even in the MLB, spring training, World Classic, anything you name it, softball starting first. I can't wait to see this weekend classic between Oklahoma. I want to see what they're made of. And this is exactly what we're going to get to see with that. We're going to have a lot more here for you at the Slasher U as we continue on with our softball preview here for 2023. Oklahoma is just the tippy top because they are preseason ranked number 1 for a very long time. Steve, is there a chance? Do you think this team goes and wins their 3rd straight national championship when it's all said and done this year? If you had to predict right now.
No.
Whoa. All right. There you go. I'm saying yes. There's no doubt in my mind, but
yeah, I just, that's so hard to do. I mean, I don't care if you're playing quarters in the bar. You're not going to win 3 straight, matches against whoever you're bouncing quarters in. 1, great. 2, now you're getting cocky. 3, it's like you just press a little bit, and that's what, again, because they're going to really be challenged from the outset in the conference. I think that's where I say something is just not going to go right. It's going to be one game, whether it's one pitch or one untimely fielding error, something is going to prevent them from winning their 3rd consecutive title. They're going to the World. They're going to the World Series. They're not going to lose in a super regional or a regional. They're going to go to the World Series, but I think fate is going to trip them up somewhere as they're trying to round, third base going home. I think fate's going to trip them, and something's going to cause them to not repeat for the 3rd straight time.
Interesting. All right. Well, there you have it. There's our first prediction on Slasher U's softball feed. Thank you for joining us for the first episode of the college softball 2023 season. Be sure to hit like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and leave us some comments. Go ahead. Even if you don't know what to say, leave something like "I love softball" or Steve has some really cool glasses, and whatever it is, say it and just do something like that. Leave us a cool comment. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back here with another episode very soon with a new team to preview as we get closer and closer to opening day in college softball. Take care.